I once believed that hard work was sufficient. They would eventually stop viewing me as the youngest, or the daughter, and start viewing me as an heir. If I arrived early, remained late, kept my head down, and maintained my goal, I was mistaken. However, you have most likely already figured it out. My name is Ava, and if you've ever purchased a property or even just perused an East Coast fancy real estate magazine, you've undoubtedly seen the name Lancaster and Sons. The company is known for its large, bold letters, elegant smiles, and opulent residences with wine cellars larger than most people's flats. We were like that. That's what they were, actually. The Sons weren't a brand. It was a blueprint. Trampling like a ghost in heels behind my father and my two elder brothers, I grew up in the shadows of building sites. They were able to discuss tactics and hold blueprints. I was given the opportunity to hold coffee. Clipboards, too. The door as well. If you were to call a Chihuahua brave for barking at a truck, they would call me ambitious. I did, however, play the game. Each internship. Every restless night, I spent going over contracts that I wasn't legally permitted to see. I was more knowledgeable about the company's finances than the CFO. I earned my MBA at age 23. I was in charge of regional operations at the age of 24. However, when the room has already determined that you are ornamental, titles are meaningless. It was a Thursday, on the day it broke. I wear my Please Take Me Seriously navy blazer that day, so I remember that. My pitch included a 5-year growth plan, market expansion, and crystal clear estimates. Lancaster and Sons might have entered the next generation with my suggestion. Rather, my father prevented me from even completing my sentence. Ava, you're not one of us, he remarked. Such as that. As if he were taking weather notes. The room went cold. I blinked. Pardon me? As calm as a corpse, he continued to shuffle through his papers. This company was founded by men, operated by guys. Yes, you are intelligent. This isn't your lane, though. Then he continued. You don't have the instinct, as if he wasn't finished yet. Clark, my eldest brother, laughed across the table as if we were all in on a joke that I was unaware of. My mom examined her hands. My uncle, who had previously confided in me that I was the company's future, simply let out a sigh as if it were not an issue. No one defended me. My father went on to say, You're emotional, as though diagnosing me like a broken refrigerator was in my best interests. You are overly concerned about other people's feelings, not enough about the process of closing transactions. He remarked, That isn't leadership. That's sentiment. I refrained from crying. I took a swallow. Hard. It seemed like a funeral in the boardroom. Nobody was even kind enough to acknowledge the death. My launch was going to take place at that gathering. I had been on that pitch for weeks. I ran it by consultants, coworkers, and even the coffee vendor downstairs. Everyone told me it was excellent. Didn't matter. Later that evening, I was trying not to tremble as I sat in the office, that I actually operated, though I didn't have the title to prove it when my father entered. He didn't knock. As if he owned the air, he just walked in. Your brothers, they're not perfect, he observed nonchalantly, as if we were discussing the weather. However, they understand the significance of bearing the Lancaster name. I raised my head. And me? That was the look he gave. That look of condescension disguised as compassion. You always had more of a fantasy, I chuckled. Couldn't resist. You mean a sighted person? He squinted his eyes. I mean someone who believes that power is synonymous with having ideas. Then he spoke it. I can still hear this line like a hellish ringtone. What a pathetic girl. It was never you who was smart. You simply put forth more effort to make up for it. He left. Didn't force the door shut. Didn't speak louder. Simply left after dropping the match. I sat there for a while, looking at my laptop's black screen as if it were a debt to me. I had a hollow chest, as if I had been swept away. I didn't cry, though. I had another feeling, clarity. It's okay if they didn't plan to occupy the table. I would construct a better table. Hell, I would construct the entire room. Nevertheless, I harbored a final glimmer of hope. The sort that suggests they might notice me at last if I prove myself once more, this time with something indisputable. As a result, I did what all pathetic girls do when they are told they are not intelligent enough. I worked harder than they did. I spent a month honing my life's pitch. Eco-luxury residences that include smart technology. On the East Coast, no one was doing it correctly. I had discovered a gap, an actual one. Something that is sustainable, scalable, and has facts to support all of its predictions. Mock-ups of logos, making a budget, market analysis, my MBA program contacts, everything. I invited the executive team and reserved a modest conference room. They arrived late. Naturally, I can still picture their arrogant expressions and crossed arms as they slouched back in their chairs, as if I were performing a cute little show before they left for lunch. And after I was done, after I gave that presentation my all, my dad said, "Are you finished?" I gave a nod. He turned to Clark after letting out a breath like if I were a bother. "Want to tell your sister why that will put us in financial ruin in a year?" Clark grinned. "I don't mean to offend, but this isn't graduate school, Ava. Adding buzzwords to a PowerPoint and calling it a plan is not enough." "Who do you think we're selling to?" he honestly asked. "Elon Musk?" Laughter. "Keep quiet." But it sounded like thunder in my ears. I said, "It's not a joke." I had a racing heart. The figures my father interrupted, saying, "Numbers lie, instinct doesn't." Additionally, I have a gut feeling that this initiative is a vanity. That term. Want to be the CEO? All right. Not here, though. This is a legitimate business. Not in your tiny sandbox. I don't recall getting my folder or making your way to the door. However, I do recall what my younger brother Ryan said right before I departed. "I've heard that a design firm is hiring if it doesn't work out. You may assist them with choosing curtains." Once more, laughter. Reckless and icy. That's when I realized this was no longer my family. Not at all. Not that I was a daughter, or a sister, or a classmate. I posed a danger. I sobbed as I hadn't in years when I got home. Heaving, ugly sobs. I wanted to set fire to the entire building. Rather, the first pact. The following morning, I left. No lavish farewell. No letter of resignation. Nothing but quiet. Nobody remembered my name when I relocated to a new city, where I was just Ava Lancaster and not Ava Lancaster, the black sheep of a legacy I was never permitted to claim. A woman who has lost everything. And I opened my laptop to a blank page in that shabby little flat above a bakery that usually smelled like cinnamon. No boardroom. Not a logo. Not a single sneer. Only me. As well as something they would never anticipate. It was a rough first 3 weeks. A studio apartment with a water heater that coughed like a 90-year-old smoker. Every time I took a shower, replaced my corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows. The walls were not thick. At night, the radiator clicked. I slept with a space heater that glowed like a nuclear mushroom and noise-canceling headphones. However, it was for the first time in my life. Their money was not mine, or their relationships, or their last name. I stopped treating it like money, even though I still owned it officially. I had clarity. I had no intention of begging to sit at their table. I intended to construct a superior one. I registered the business under the name AARA Designs, which none of my relatives would recognize. Named for a star that is so dim that it cannot be seen with the naked eye. However, it exists. Blazing, steady, circling in silence while the louder stars go out. I craved energy like that. Not visible, not bothered, unstoppable. Initially, it was just me and a laptop that was kept together by duct tape and sheer willpower. I created Canva's original logo. I used FedEx to print pitch decks around the clock. Black coffee and ramen were my mainstays, with the occasional loaf of complimentary bread from the bakery downstairs when the cashier felt particularly giving. I offered my services to anyone who would listen, including boutique developers, small contractors, and those building custom homes who couldn't afford the large companies. Most of them declined. Some, however, agreed, and I handled each and every yes as though it were $1 million account. I wanted to do better than them, not just get by, according to my own terms. I approached each assignment as though it were a stage. I couldn't afford to make mistakes or hire staff, so I did the drafting, material sourcing, subcontractor coordination, and site progress checks alone. There was no room for failure. I refused to let their voices to dwell rent-free in my head for the rest of my life, not because I was afraid of collapsing. I completed 2 complete builds and 6 significant renovations in less than a year. After hiring my first worker, I added 4 more. I discovered an inexpensive studio with leaky windows and exposed brick. After patching everything up, we moved in. Word got out, silently. However, it spread. The piece was self-evident. Neat lines, clever technology, systems that are effective, eco-luxury without the appearance of a science experiment. What about my clients? They weren't the target market for Lancaster and Sons. They were younger, sharper. Households are run by women. Millennial couples are searching for unique designs. Professionals who didn't want a mansion that looked like it was lifted from a brochure from the 1990s. My father had never anticipated this market. Since he didn't think it was real, I had an edge because he was blind. Coasting on a name, still. A dream from 30 years ago is still being sold. I lowered my head, remained unnamed. No interviews, not a flash, only calm, steady triumphs. Behind the scenes, I was observing them, always. Their web page, their social, their news releases. While I was adjusting to change in real time, they continued to boast about legacy. Then I became strategic. My secret weapon was a branding consultant I hired from one of their rivals, a lady who had been passed up for a partner because she was too direct. Everything was redone, including the pitch, tone, and logo. Developed a brand narrative that evoked strong emotions. We were selling transformations, not just houses, comfort, modernity, an improved future. Lancaster and Sons didn't even consider that kind of future. We also began placing bids on commercial projects of a moderate caliber, silently. My father used to win contracts like that when he was asleep. However, he was now losing them to a no-name company that had more creative ideas and executed them more quickly. They still had no idea who we were. They were unaware that it was me, which was excellent. Due to invisibility, it's a present. They were powerless to stop what they couldn't predict. I then began poaching. Not in a showy manner. Silently. With caution, the decent ones. The ones that aren't given enough attention. They are dismissive, clever, and resilient, just like me. I sent emails, DMs, and invites to coffee. I made no promises about benefits or titles. I offered to sit down, an actual one, at a table where ideas were more important than last names and testosterone. They arrived, one by one. AARA Designs was no longer a rebellious company. There was a movement. Then I realized that we were more than a whisper. We were making a proposal to a big real estate developer in upstate New York who wanted to construct 3 environmentally friendly complexes. We and Lancaster and Sons were the only 2 finalists. I had seen their suggestion, the same old safe nonsense, expensive, elegantly rendered, and soulless. The customer, an elderly woman with steel gray hair and hawk-like eyes, scanned our deck before turning to face me. "Who are you?" With real curiosity, she inquired. I grinned. "Just someone who needs to prove something." The transaction was ours. We outbid Lancaster and Sons once more 3 months later. But then again, each victory was a weakness in their defenses. They were still unaware that it was me. However, they sensed me. Their desperate use of hashtags we came up with to announce green initiatives that sounded like hurried homework projects was a clear indication. The new smart home series they introduced bore a striking resemblance to our trial prototype from 6 months earlier. It was nearly depressing. Nearly. Still, I said nothing, as I wasn't seeking attention. I wanted to change. I entered a regional design expo one afternoon. Just looking around. No booth, no name tag, curiosity only. Near the rear was a tiny setup for Lancaster and Sons. There were Ryan and Clark, trying far too hard not to smile. A man who I had met at a pitch session 2 weeks prior approached them. He grabbed their pamphlet, looked at it, then he shrugged. He apologized, saying, "I'm already in talks with Era. What they're doing is truly unique." Clark stopped. Ryan's expression wavered. "Era?" He said it again. The name had a nasty taste. The man gave a nod. "You ought to look them up." Then he turned to leave. I sipped my coffee while standing a few steps back. Observing Clark turn to face Ryan and inquire, "What on earth is AARA?" I grinned to myself. The reckoning had begun. After 18 months, I began to see a trend. The Lancaster and Sons Company was in disarray. It's the kind of slow, sour rot that begins at the foundation and works its way up, rather than a big, Hollywood-style collapse. The kind that is invisible until it has already penetrated the walls. It started with a main resort proposal. For months, they had been promoting it in newsletter blasts, LinkedIn posts, and trade journals. A new era of luxury. In any case, the client then quietly withdrew. It was creative differences on paper, but in practice, we made a more intelligent offer. Cleaner, quicker. The layoffs followed. A less experienced designer, a receptionist. I once knew a project manager who was nearly a Lancaster blue bleeder. One night, with hesitation, as if he were going to confess to a crime, he reached out. He wrote, "I saw what you're doing. I would love to participate if there is room." Nothing sassy was said by me, didn't boast. I just emailed him the contract along with a greeting from AARA. Then came the blow that nobody anticipated. A government contract was lost by Lancaster and Sons. Large one. A comprehensive energy efficiency overhaul of state facilities. Multi-year agreement. They hadn't even placed a strong bid, believed it to be theirs by default. We succeeded. They didn't even anticipate our arrival. It was a disastrous press release. They didn't mention us, though, and instead used corporate spin and evasive justifications about market shifts and competitive pricing. Couldn't. They were unaware. They simply realized they were being outplayed. I became aware of the fear. As they tried too hard and used language that didn't seem like them, their social media presence became increasingly strange. They began to mimic our voice, our catchphrases, even our marketing materials' color scheme. I nearly felt guilty. Nearly. Then the boardroom came back to me. The laughing, the smiles, the remarks regarding curtain selection. They were unaware that the girl they labeled as pathetic was the one who founded the business that was destroying them from the inside out. I didn't have to start gossip. I didn't have to fabricate tales. Fear spreads itself. My assistant came on my office door one Thursday morning with a look on her face that I had never seen before, a combination of amazement, worry, and terror brought on by caffeine. She held out her iPad and said, "You must see this." It had a headline. "Due to delayed projects and contract violations, Lancaster and Sons is facing legal action." It wasn't just negative publicity. An exposure was made. Several sources: internal dysfunction, irate clients, missed deadlines, and budget overruns. Quotes from former workers who have not been identified. Several of those workers were now employed at AARA. I didn't gloat, though. I didn't send out a tweet. I didn't make a triumphal lap around the workplace. I simply closed my eyes, sat back in my chair, and inhaled deeply. Retaliation was no longer the focus. Truth was at issue. Regarding demonstrating that I wasn't some overly sentimental afterthought, pretending to be CEO in a sandbox, I was authentic. The one they didn't anticipate. The world, however, was going to. Like any other Monday, the following one began with coffee, emails, and architectural mock-ups for a brand new upscale Seattle complex. My assistant ran into the room like the building was on fire. As I was in the middle of scrolling, she said, "You're trending, Ava." I blinked. "What?" Her phone was thrust into my face. "You're in style." And there it was. My name. My true name. Lancaster, Ava. The black sheep. No, not the girl who went. Not the person who was made fun of in meetings. The founder of AARA Designs turned out to be a Lancaster dynasty, estranged daughter. There was more than one article about it. It was all over. CNN FORBEs, Business Insider. Shows in the morning, Twitter, LinkedIn, even TikTok. I'm not sure how I feel about some college student who put together a video of me at a private speech and referred to me as the real-life Lady Stark. However, one headline in particular resonated with me. I still have the snapshot I took. "Meet the woman who silently destroyed a dynasty. The ghost architect." It wasn't necessary for me to read. The story they were telling I already knew. For having too loud of a dream, The daughter was banished. Despite leaving empty-handed, the underdog created something that no one could ignore. They referred to it as poetry, tactical, brutal, lovely. My email blew up. Makes calls.emails, offers for investments. People always believed in me, even though I hadn't spoken to them in years. But the one important message? My mother gave it to me. Your dad watched the news. It has been an hour since he last spoke. I spent a lot of time looking at that message. Not because I was happy. Not even anger. Simply silent. The man who used to say that I was never the smart one now had to face the reality that I had created something more intelligent than he could have ever dreamed. And I could have done it without his approval. My publicist entered my office that same day with a packet that looked like it was radioactive. A request has been made, she stated. For what purpose? She grinned. An interview during prime time. National. They desire you. Not AARA. Only you, not the mystery CEO. I took a moment to sit with it. Era wasn't created for attention. For freedom, I built it. To exact revenge. For a new beginning. For all the girls who have ever been told to make themselves smaller so that a man can feel taller. Perhaps, nevertheless, it was time. We should do it, I said. 3 days later, I was in a brightly lit studio in a navy suit that was so sharp it could cut through glass. No logos. Don't be theatrical. Simply being there. The host began by sharing my background. The controversy, the rising, the treachery, the arc of retribution. Then she posed the eagerly anticipated question. Are you really Charles Lancaster's daughter? I grinned. Be calm. Managed. Yes. Why keep it a secret? I didn't, I said. I simply stopped saying I'm sorry for not being welcome. She blinked, then gave a nod. And now you've created a business that has surpassed theirs. I gave her a direct look. Outperforming isn't the point. It's about creating something that embodies who I am and providing a space for others to do the same. A standing ovation marked the conclusion of the interview. The traffic that night caused our website to crash. More than 300 cooperation inquiries were sent to us. Within a day, our valuation increased by 12%. The quiet in the Lancaster family group chat, however, was far worse than any of that. Still going strong. It's still silent. Until at last one message got through. From Clark. You took advantage of us. I gazed at it. No rage, no surprise. Just a sort of weary incredulity. They erased me by using my silence. The world now understood. I wasn't finished either. Due to the last chapter, it was going to be intimate. 2 days later, the invitation came. Pristine ivory paper. Lettering embossed in gold. Reunion of the Lancaster family. Saturday, 4:00 p.m. The property. No private message. Don't apologize. Only custom. As though nothing had occurred. I giggled when I looked at the envelope. They were still unable to grasp it. However, I would be present. Not for them. For me, the estate didn't seem as big as I remembered. It's funny how that operates. It feels like a mansion to a child. When you've constructed anything yourself, it's basically greenery and brick. A house that lacks spirit and has too many chandeliers. My black Rolls-Royce pulled up. The ghost model. It fits, doesn't it? Not to be seen, but to remind them that they never looked in the first place. The girl they deleted had come back. The gate's security officer took a second look. Then, as if his hands were too slow, he gestured me through. With Mercedes, BMWs, and a vintage Bentley parked like a trophy, the driveway was a red carpet of family status games. The only Rolls was mine. I wore an ivory suit when I went out. Not a flash. No logos. Just focus and crisp lines. Customized quiet. The buzz of chatter on the patio abruptly halted. People's eyes shifted. Mouths stopped speaking in the middle. I didn't require attention. I entered first and made the space clear. The first person to welcome me was my mother. She had an older face. Softer. More worn out around the eyes. Perhaps regret, or simply the weight of all that was unsaid. Her voice was low as she said, "You look amazing." I slightly leaned in. I'm grateful. Let's not act like anything. She nodded slightly. All right. The party continued indoors. In a way, there was music, clinking glasses. People were laughing as if they were trying too hard. I ran into old neighbors, uncles, and cousins. They're all doing that strange social math, like, wait, didn't she leave? The one about which people used to whisper? My brothers were standing around the hearth. Naturally, deals were done in that dumb fireplace, and I was told to go get more wine. When Clark noticed me, his jaw tensed. Ryan looked at the keys in my hand, then at my watch. He appeared to have just been informed that ghosts existed. I didn't pause to say hello, did not have to. This was no longer their time. My father was standing by himself on the back patio, gazing out over the grass, as if he was trying to recall what it was like to be the owner. The sound of my heels hitting stone caused him to turn. And Charles Lancaster, for the first time in my life, looked tiny, not feeble, not lost. It was just a smaller version of him than the one that had filled the entire room. His voice was softer than I remembered when he said, "You came," as if the remarks had now cost him something. "Yes," I said. He observed me, as if he was still searching for the girl he had previously labeled pathetic. He remarked, "You've established a solid reputation for yourself." I didn't answer, did not have to. His eyes wandered. He cleared his throat. The businesses, battling. I remained silent. He continued to speak. "Your brothers are trying their hardest, but things aren't the same as they were before. We need your assistance." And there it was, they ask, after everything. I looked into his steady, serene gaze. Not upset, not spiteful. "Just be clear," I said. "You once told me I wasn't the smart one." He blinked. I continued. "I was a dreamer, you claimed, sentimental, that I believed power came from ideas." He didn't dispute it. Didn't dispute. I pointed around. The home, the gathering. Now, the brand was subtly crumbling beneath the weight of its own conceit. "You want my assistance now?" He opened his mouth. Perhaps to clarify? To defend, perhaps. However, I interrupted him. "I'm not here to help you out." He appeared astonished. Not surprised, though. Perhaps he had always known this day would arrive. "You were too busy making fun of me to notice what I had built. It wasn't for you that I did it. In spite of you, I accomplished it." That lingered in the air. I then turned to go, but I stopped halfway across the terrace. I glanced over my shoulder. I remarked in a quiet but incisive voice, "You are correct about one thing. I'm not like you." I grinned. And I'm grateful for that. I took my time walking back through the house, allowing them to observe, letting it fall. They split up like water. Behind me came whispers, a few strained smiles. Some people are interested. However, I didn't support any of them. No more. This has nothing to do with revenge. It has to do with visibility, about occupying space in an environment that previously attempted to make me smaller. I climbed into the vehicle, shut the door. The sun had warmed the leather. As if sensing that we weren't finished, the engine purred. I glanced back at the home for a moment, not at the building. However, at the girl I was before, the person who spent her entire life waiting to be sufficient, who pleaded for permission, who made her father feel huge by playing little. She had moved out of that house. The driver's seat was occupied by her. In charge. The world would never forget her again after that day. The amusing thing about power is that you don't feel loud when you actually have it when it's in your hands, not borrowed or pleaded for. You sense silence. Still, the bones, settled. It was something you carried through every smirk, every rejection, and every door that shut behind you, not anything that anyone gave you. Now, I was that. I didn't say goodbye when I left the family reunion. Did not have to. Grand departures aren't necessary for every situation. Only ones that are clean. I returned to the AARA headquarters the following morning. No champagne, no flowers, and no "you showed them" remarks. Just a mission, a crew, and a desk. The most recent round of partnership requests was held by my assistant, 3 chains of upscale hotels, a development company on the West Coast. A green tech business is interested in working together. "Do you want to review them right away?" she inquired. I gave a head shake. Later. I chose to stand at the window and gaze at the skyline instead. The low sun cut like a razor through the glass. Across the street, I could see our new headquarters. Steel and vision were rising level by floor where nothing had been. At that moment, it struck me as a fact rather than a victory. This isn't retaliation. Reclamation is what this is. I wasn't here to ruin them. They were too naive to believe in the version of me that I became. Of course, the media continued to circle. The headlines weren't kind. Each article included a different version of dethroning dynasty with an estranged daughter. Yes, it's catchy. It didn't get the point, though. No one was dethroned by me. I recently created my own kingdom. I discovered an invitation in my mailbox one day. International Design Futures Summit keynote speaker. I chuckled. Not that it wasn't genuine. However, a part of me still struggled to reconcile my past self with my current self. They once rolled their eyes at me when I talked during meetings. People flew in to listen to me now. I wore a crisp black dress when I took the stage. No slides, no tricks, just the truth and a microphone. I discussed sustainability, inventiveness, emotional architecture, how structures may convey purpose as well as riches. People should be served by design, not impressed. Then I stopped, close to the end. Discussed the meaning of being undervalued. Because no one sees you coming. Being invisible is the best freedom. I kept names to myself, did not have to. The audience was aware. The business was aware. I received a standing ovation from them. A young woman then came up to me, perhaps in the late 20s. She felt apprehensive in her shoulders. She questioned how I could tell when it was time to move on from my previous life. When staying started to feel like self-erasure, I answered with a smile. She gave a nod, glassy eyes. That look was familiar to me. The pain of making yourself smaller for others who didn't even notice. I advised her to have faith in the quiet, to incorporate it. Since some of the world's most potent things develop silently, AARA continued to grow. Silently, foreign customers, press that become more courteous and less breathless. Prizes, recognition. I did, however, keep my world small. My circle is more tightly knit, and occasionally, I would receive a note from a former acquaintance. A year or so later, Clark sent one. You prevailed. Well done. I didn't respond, as winning wasn't the goal. It has to do with becoming. Ryan also sent one. A voice message. It sounded like he was drunk. You were always aware of your actions. We simply didn't understand. I listened to that one. Twice. After then, it was erased. Because their shame wasn't the reason I was doing this. I was doing it for that girl who sat among wolves in a boardroom, carrying a vision they were unable to see, and who would not let it die, because they did not believe in it. I was standing in front of a mirror one evening, the vintage type, with a small crack in the corner and brass edges. When I moved into my first apartment, I purchased it at a flea market. It once represented someone making a concerted effort to be considered seriously. It now represented a lady who knew she existed without having to be seen. No more substantiation. No more saying sorry. No more conducting intelligence in spaces designed to cast doubt on me. Simply being there. Simply existing. That, in my opinion, is the true legacy. Not the one they attempted to pass down via their sons like a crown. However, the one I constructed myself. My own wounds. My own words. Today, AARA is more than just a business. A constellation is what it is. A reminder that yes, you can, to all undervalued minds. You will indeed. No, authorization is not required. I still occasionally walk by the old Lancaster building. Their trucks are still visible, their emblem. Somehow, they're still in business. However, the gleam has vanished. Now the name is just that, a name. We're constructing schools in the interim. Medical facilities, cost-effective housing that doesn't appear punitive, function and beauty, roots and vision. Additionally, I no longer wince when my entire name is called Lancaster, Ava. The girl who lacked intelligence, the woman who changed the narrative, not for cheers, but for the ones that follow.